So, hello everybody, welcome to this event on planning for every learner. So, we're just about to start our first session for today with Emily Bryson, which is accessibility in the multi-level classroom. So, I don't know about you, but one of the things I love about teaching is how every learner is different. It's one of the most beautiful things about humanity, and it's the thing that means as a teacher you never get bored, right? Every group is different, every learner is different. But it's also a challenge, right? How do you plan classes that meet the needs of so many diverse learners with all their different interests, their different skill levels, their backgrounds, experiences, everything that they bring to the classroom? So this is what we're talking about today. Luckily, we've got Emily and we've got other expert teachers today exactly to help us with this topic. So if you've just joined us, welcome. Please say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're joining us from. And let's say hello to Emily. Emily, hi.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on and for everybody to comment for coming. I'm really looking forward to getting everybody's ideas and hearing their experiences of teaching multi-level classrooms and hopefully making life a
Excellent.
bit easier
Yeah,
for
yeah, we hope so. So, welcome. We're really excited to have you as well. Where are you joining us from today?
currently in Nicaragua. So
Wow.
for many years, I was teaching at City of Glasgow College, and then a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to go traveling whilst working remotely, and so I've been doing that for the last year and a bit. Back in time for IATF though, so back to
Wow.
the UK for then. So quite
Wow,
exciting.
wonderful. That is exciting. Okay, so well, in a moment, I'm going to hand over to you. But first, let me just introduce you to everybody and tell them a little bit more about you. So, Emily Bryson has over 20 years' experience in the English language teaching classroom. She's written various print and digital materials for major publishers. She's passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the use of visual tools and graphic facilitation strategies to make learning more engaging, accessible, and fun. So we can't wait to hear more about this, Emily, if you to show us how to do that. Just to mention as well that Emily has a website. We'll share the link with you. It's in the handout. We'll share it with you in the chat. It's www.emilybrysonelt.com. So check out her website and we'll share all the links with you. So over to you, Emily. I'm here. I'm going to turn my camera off, but I'm here if you need me. And I'll be back at the end of the session and we'll take some audience questions.
Great, thank you so much. Um, this session's called Tiny Changes, Big Impacts. And when I first started teaching, like many teachers, I realized that my classes were not an identikit of all exactly the same level. Beginners were all beginners, intermediate were all perfectly intermediate. In the real world, that doesn't happen. And I think when I was preparing for those classes, the temptation was to prepare multiple classes, multiple lessons. And that's not practical. It takes a lot of time and you don't need to do it. So this session shares a lot of my tips for differentiating classes to make them accessible and inclusive for every learner, because every learner is different, every class is different, and everyone has different needs. Um, Oops. So I'm going to be using Canva Whiteboard today. I like using Canva Whiteboard because I can doodle as I go. I like doodling because it's a good way of getting more visuals into a classroom because that's one of the best ways of making learning accessible. So if you're not familiar with Canva Whiteboard, it's similar to Miro or Mural or Google's Jamboard, which sadly they have retired. Um, but Canva also does lots of other cool things like make social media posts, make Instagram reels, um, make presentations, etc. So it's a really great learning tool and it's free. So I recommend checking it out. Um, um, So what is accessible learning so this is what our plan is for the session. What is accessible learning? What challenges are there? And then some simple strategies to differentiate learning. So hopefully by the end of the session, you will feel confident that you can differentiate all the classes very quickly and simply for every learner. So Joanna already gave me a bit of an introduction, but I tend to like starting my sessions with this slide or this image that I have hand drawn. It's an image of me with my white hair at the front. And the books that I've written, Voices for National Geographic Learning, The Age of ESOL, 50 Ways to Teach Life Skills, and some really simple doodles of me graphically facilitating sessions, delivering teacher training. There's a laptop to signify webinars that I do quite a lot of. Um, as a teacher, I taught a lot of literacy level learners. So learners whose first, maybe were developing their first script. Sorry, maybe learners from who spoke a lot of Arabic, Farsi, um, who didn't have Roman script and maybe hadn't learned the literacy skills in their first language either. So that was a learning curve of how to make lessons accessible for them. I'm an inclusive practitioner and an outdoors fanatic. So you see a picture at the bottom of me hugging trees and climbing hills and swimming. And I wanted to show you this picture partly because it simplifies. Imagine a world in English language teaching where there are no visuals. Imagine going into a classroom with no pictures. It just instantly makes things less inclusive. One picture can express meaning, it can aid understanding, it can help students to process, it can help students to remember, all sorts of benefits of having doodles. And they're all very simple. Like, for example, this little swimming person is just a little triangle with a circle, a little wiggly line underneath it. So you'll see these throughout my presentation. Um, so I first want to just start by checking in. Oh, and also just to say, this is a great activity to do on the first day of class with your students. You can get them to doodle some things about themselves or choose some images about themselves and then share it, get to know each other. But for a check-in, I think it's important to know where your students are. Many of my learners were from refugee backgrounds and they had mental health pressures, worries, and all sorts of other emotional kind of baggage that they brought into the classroom. So finding out how they were at the beginning of a session helped me know how focused they were going to be. Were they going to be distracted because they were worrying about the Home Office, for example, and their visa application? Or were they going to be in sunny, happy mode and all good to go? Um, so I'd like to ask you to, in the chat, either say how are you feeling today? Are you a giant sun? Are you a sunny cloud? Are you a white fluffy cloud? Are you a grey rainy cloud? Or are you a terrible storm cloud because you're really having a bad day? You can do this with emojis or you can just put in the chat. Okay, so seeing lots of sunny clouds. Lots of super suns. Oh, good. You're in a good learning space today. Excellent. All ready to go. Okay, now I want to show you that this can also be used in another way. So a lot of these visual tools and visual metaphors that I use can be used in various different ways, which makes them minimal preparation. So that was one way of using that. But I'd also like you to do the same activity again, but to say, how do you feel about accessible learning for strategies for multi-level classes? Are you a storm cloud? Are you a rainy cloud? Are you a fluffy cloud? Are you a sunny cloud? Or are you a giant sun? How do you feel about um, teaching in an accessible manner in the classroom, differentiating your lessons? Okay, got some clouds, got some clouds. Okay, so be a bit more in the middle here. Cloudy. Good to see nobody's in the storm cloud category. That's good. Okay, so maybe just check in at the end. Um, So let's talk about what is accessible learning. So accessible learning is, and here we've got an image of a set of stairs, and at the bottom of the stairs we have a little person who is struggling because the step is just too high for them. It's really challenging for them. Whereas in the middle, halfway up the stairs, we've got someone kind of relaxedly walking up, cruising up. The steps are probably at just the perfect height for them. And then we've got at the top, we've got a superhero powering through and up the top to the top of the stairs because it's the stairs are actually too small for them. They're flying. So they are what we would call in the English language teaching classroom a fast finisher. And I think in every class we have these different students. Some are fast finishers who are going to fly up. Some are maybe needing extra support, and some are exactly spot on for the class that we had planned for them. And if only every student was like this, but sadly, everyone is, well, not sadly, everyone is different. Thankfully, everyone is different because being different is wonderful and makes the world an interesting, amazing place. Um, so one of these reasons that everyone is different and all our learners have jagged profiles. Can anyone in the chat tell me what is meant by a jagged profile? And here you can see a graph. I use quite a lot of graphs for telling stories. It's an empty graph template, and here we've got A0 for low level beginner learners, pre-beginner learners, and then we've got A1 and it goes up to C1 to advanced. So it's got the level on this side and the skill along the bottom on the graph. What does it mean to have a jagged profile? It can also sometimes be referred to as having a spiky profile. So a profile that is not linear yet. That could be one. Levels of different skills, exactly. Yeah, different level of speaking and writing, exactly. Could be, so in English language teaching, we have lots of different skills. We assess learners on their reading, their writing, their speaking, their listening, maybe their pronunciation. And so a learner with a jagged profile might have, for example, this is what was common in my classes, was lots of students who, because they lived in Scotland, so their speaking and listening were actually pretty good because they'd been maybe learning on the out and about, at work, volunteering, at bus stops, etc. But maybe their reading and writing was a lot lower than their speaking and listening. But then obviously you also had students whose reading was very strong and whose writing maybe needed some extra support, for example. So learners are different in those ways. And learners can be referred, I like to think of them as tortoises and hares. And we're all familiar with the tortoise and hare story. If you're familiar with this story, please write a very short summary, one sentence summary in the chat. But here we have a rabbit. On the left, we've got a drawing of a rabbit, and on the right, we've got a drawing of a hare. Oh, a hare of a tortoise. And then there's a finish line. The tortoise has just passed the finish line, and it's from this story where, yeah, an arrogant rabbit, exactly. So there's an arrogant rabbit who thinks they can go really quickly and finish first, where in actual fact the tortoise and then decided to go for a nap halfway through, and then the tortoise actually won, even though they just plodded along. And I think this is quite a good metaphor for our learners because some students are very confident and maybe they don't put the effort in as much as the students who maybe lack the confidence or know that are more aware of their abilities. But in the chat, I would like you to just say what makes a tortoise and a hare. So, what is it about our learners that makes maybe one a fast finisher or one a steady learner? What is it that differentiates our learners? Why are they different? And as you write, I'm going to add your ideas in the chat. Okay. Yeah, different personalities could be one. It could be, yeah, that some students um, are very confident, they know what they're doing. They're just confident humans. Attitude, yeah, motivation levels. So maybe if a student, for example, this tortoise might have an exam coming up, so they're highly motivated. Yeah, willpower, determination, anything that might hold them back as learners that maybe, so for example, if you've got a student in your class who's not understanding things or needing a bit more support, what's maybe the reasons for that? Yep, skill levels. So actually having skills such as study skills, what I noticed in my classes was that learners who had been to university or college or finished, even had just finished high school in their home country, um, had learned a lot faster. And students who, sorry, yeah, students who had a great experience of education learned a lot faster than the students who maybe didn't have the same study skills that hadn't brought with them. Yeah, someone had put neurodivergent as well, so maybe learners who have ADHD or autism or a specific learning difference such as I should have locked that in place. Um, Such as dyslexia or dyspraxia. Yeah, mental health could be an issue. So, trauma experience, mental health could be an issue too. Peer pressure, that's a really important one, actually. So, if you're in a class sitting next to someone who is distracting you or who wants you to not work very hard for whatever reason, then that's going to distract you. I certainly felt that when I was at university, and my brother was a bad influence on me. Okay, what other else? Oh yeah, family, like family support as well, level of family support. These are some brilliant. Thank you so much for contributing so much in the chat. Patience and time management, yeah, exactly. Speech issues, shyness, lack of confidence, support system. Yeah, these are all brilliant. Thank you so much for putting all these amazing ideas into the chat. The question is here, what makes a tortoise and a hare? What's the um, reason for some learners being needing a bit more support and some learners from flying? So it could be neurodiversity, personality, motivation, skills, lots of different reasons. It could just be on one particular day, they're distracted because they had a bad morning. Um, or overworking too hard. Many of my learners worked overnight and then they would come to class as soon as they'd finished their 12-hour night shift, which is going to make them quite tired in class. So sadly, I don't have time to go into accessible all the different neurodiversities and specific learning differences and what is a learner with what are some symptoms of people with ADHD or dyslexia, dyscalculia, etc. You can find that online. I would recommend following people like Rachel Oner or Anne Margaret Smith. I'm going to write these in the chat. Margaret Smith at ELT Well. So they both have really great courses. So Rachel Oner has a really great course at Nile, and Anne Margaret Smith has a really great course at ELT Well on neurodiversity, and I would highly recommend both of them. Um, but yeah, so learners could have a various range of this is one of my sketch notes, which is available at my website, emilybrysonelt.com sketchnoting. And you can download it actually as a desktop reminder and to help you support learners. But what I would say is that the top tips for supporting any learner is that every learner is different. So ask them what will help them. Give clear instructions. And that could mean repeating the instructions multiple times, but also keep rubrics short, keep instructions short, one question at a time, one activity at a time. Build their confidence, because confidence is everything with learning a language, and create a welcoming atmosphere. So those are the 4 key tips for everything. But yeah, learners with, and I think there's a lot of crossover with these tips. So, for example, um, one of the challenges I think is that for teaching is that we as teachers might not know if a learner has ADHD. So someone with ADHD might be quite hyperactive, they might be very creative, they might not pay attention so much in class. Um, Learners with autism, for example, um, might prefer to work by themselves. They might be quite shy, might be quite literal. Um, Learners with dyslexia might have issues with reading and writing, um, or with memory processing. And dyscalculia, it's similar with maths and numbers. Um, and for these, the challenge, I think, for English language teachers is that we don't often know if students have a neurodiversity or a specific learning difference. It's actually very difficult to diagnose somebody with a second language learner with dyslexia, because it's very hard to know if it's the language that's challenged for them, or if it's the reading and writing in whatever language. Um, but there is a way. ELT Well does have a way. So check out her site. She does have a dyslexia pack. Um, One of the good things, but and then you've got digital skills, literacy, study skills, mobility, sensory impairment. These are going to be much more obvious. So if a learner has low-level digital skills, that means that they maybe can't need more support to do their homework online, for example. Then we can provide, that's going to be quite obvious. Literacy as well, we're going to notice pretty quickly if students are having trouble reading, writing, or spelling, for example. Study skills, we're going to notice that pretty quickly, which students are really great at doing their homework and making study plans and taking their learning to the next level without being asked, like being autonomous, really. And sensory impairment, a lot of times students will tell you if they need additional support with their with sight and hearing, etc. Mobility the same. So, but you'll notice quite a lot of crossover with these. So if you make one little change for one learner, for example, with ADHD, minimizing distractions. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here to make it more accessible. So minimizing distractions, you could do this maybe for learners with ADHD who are struggling to focus, for example. But at the same time, I think everybody needs to have distractions minimized. If there's a party going on outside the window, then I'm going to be distracted because I want to be at that party, for example. So close the curtains, etc., if need be. Same with, for example, digital skills, um, learning one skill at a time. And I think that goes for every skill anywhere, learning one skill at a time, making one change at a time, is the best way forward for developing and improving all skills over time. So if you can, I'll let you take a look at this in more detail, because that's an entire webinar here. EmilyBrysonELT.com/sketchnoting, and you will find this accessible teaching tips sketchnote for which will give you more ideas. Okay, onwards to whiteboards. And for me, there's two whiteboards here. I would, on the left, there is a whiteboard. Both whiteboard pictures are this have the same words. Who sounds cook, foot, boot, spoon, and ch sounds lunch, watch, cheese, chair. So this was one from a phonics lesson with my literacy class. And on the left, there are some doodles next to the words. And on the right, there are no doodles next to the words. Can you tell me which whiteboard would you prefer as a um, as a student? Would you prefer the whiteboard on the right or would you prefer the whiteboard on the left? So as a student, which one do you think is more accessible? Yeah, one on the left. Everybody's saying the one with the pictures. That's what happens in every single webinar, and that to me is the importance of using visuals in class. And you will notice that these visuals are not art. There is absolutely nothing artistic about this foot. In fact, there's something positively very wrong about this foot, but it's obvious that it is a foot. It took me less than a second to draw, and students were then confident to copy it into their notebooks, which then meant that they could go home and study from their notebooks. And especially if a lot of my students didn't have scripts in their first language, so they couldn't write a translation for foot, so they had a little picture in their notebooks for this. Same with the spoon, something funny going on there, but it was enough of a. There's some research to show that you only need an image to look, I think it's something like 60% similar to be able to identify it. And so long as it's identifiable, then it can help students to learn. And if you're really not a fan of using doodles, you can go to if you're using Canva, for example, you can search the vast image bank in Canva and add lots of images that way. Okay. The other thing I love for making learning accessible is using graphic organizers. So here, can anyone say what level this graphic organizer might be useful for? If you just say in the chat what level you think. And here you'll notice, again, very simple drawings. So I'm going to just quickly draw them for you because for me, this is a very adaptable tool that you can use again and again for reading, writing, speaking, listening, for everything. So you could use, for example, like you could use this for um, preparing for a written text, for example. Who is the story about? Where did it happen? When did it happen? What happened? Why? And then students write down their ideas before they write what they're going to write about. You could get them to, instead of listening, and I think one of the things we do as teachers quite often is we overwhelm them during listening activities. So during a listening activity, we're asking them to listen to this sometimes quite complex text, audio file. And then while we're doing that, we're expecting them to read full sentence or full questions. So they're reading and they're listening at the same time, which is completely unnatural, but also unnecessary because you can actually just summarize each question into 5 little words and 5 little drawings, for example. And you can do this with all sorts of questions. It doesn't need to be uh, who, where, why, when. You could have like an icon for, like, for example, an apple and have them write down all the food they hear, for example. Okay, I'm just going to go back to the question. I'm seeing, okay, lots of different mixed levels. Okay, so people are saying A1, A2, beginner. That's interesting. Level 1, B1. Okay, good that I'm seeing some B1s because actually I think this particular tool is possible for every single learner. I would use it as a proficient language user. I think it can be for any learner, and graphic organizers like this, where you have minimal words and just visuals, and a space for thinking can be used and reused for multiple levels. So here, if you had, for example, an A1 student in the class, they could write maybe one sentence for who. Whereas if there was a student maybe towards the A2 level of your class, you could push them and get them to write two sentences, for example. Um, and I'm just going to quickly, if you've got a notepad handy, please doodle along with me. So who is an N shape and an O. Oops. And then a little smiley face. Where is a rectangle? Oh, sorry, drawing on Canva whiteboard isn't quite as pretty as drawing on Adobe Fresco, which is what I usually draw on, but it gets the point across, so it's all fine. And that's the whole purpose. See, leaves for where. When is a circle with an L shape. Why is a speech bubble with a question mark. And then what can be lots of different objects. So for example, a pen is a rectangle with a triangle. And you can add little L shape and another rectangle if you want to turn it from a pencil into a pen. And then a book is a rectangle with a couple of little lines out of it. And using little doodles like that, I quite like this one for timekeeping in class. It's quite good for writing the schedule. You can add, for example, a room number, like door, and then add the room number as well. So that can help students have a visual clue for their schedules, etc. But yeah, you can use this for pretty much any level, any topic, any grammar, lots of different things. So yeah, very flexible. And actually, okay. And for supporting learners with study skills, I quite like to turn the whiteboard into a notebook or turn the flip chart into a notebook by drawing this little rectangle, a couple of little lines, and then you can add like a little spiral down the side. Or here you can add some little C shapes like this, for example. And then that means that gives you a chance to let students to turn your whiteboard into the notebook so that students can see exactly how to lay out their notebooks. Because I think sometimes students need a bit of extra support, a bit of extra ideas. Add the day, add the teacher's name, add the title, because I think notebooks can get quite messy. And it can also be quite good to have a messy notebook for ideas and activities and answers, for example, and then a tidy notebook for writing up student notes after a session. And it's quite a good habit to get them into, is to write up their student notes. For vocabulary, give them a tool. So like this, for example. So write a word, write it in my language. So they're writing a translation, and that using my language instead of translation means that my language is obviously easier word than translate, although a lot of students probably will know that word. Then write a picture if they want to, and then write an example sentence. And that could be quite a good way of giving fast finishers something to do. Like, for example, you could have students that need a bit more support writing the word and then my language. And then, but if fast finishers, you could get them to add a picture. Or if they're super fast, a picture and a sentence. So at the bare minimum, students are at least writing a word and the translation. I'm going to just whiz up here first because I missed something. So the other way of differentiating learning is to give learners difficult tasks and then very difficult tasks. And the reason, any ideas why I'm saying very difficult and difficult? Um, so for example, what I just did here was I gave the learners that need a bit more support this as an activity, just write the word and then write it in my language. And then I gave students that maybe needed a bit more of a challenge, three things to do, three tasks, and then a lot of a challenge into um, all four items in their vocabulary notebook. So that's developing study skills at the same time as giving your learners something different, different levels of challenges. Got any reasons why I'm using difficult tasks and very difficult tasks? Yeah, exactly. Easy might affect confidence negatively. Perfectly explained. So yeah, if you say easy tasks and difficult tasks, and that's instantly putting the students that need extra support into the easy, not being challenged category, and everyone wants to feel like they're being challenged. So we've got difficult tasks that would be 5 questions, for example, or 1 activity, 2 activities, 3 activities. Very difficult tasks, 10 questions. And other ways to do this, if you have any other ideas, write them in the chat. If this inspires you to share other ways that you challenge your fast finishers and support your tortoises, then please add them in the chat throughout so we can all learn from each other. So one way is to copy and cover the text. So after reading a text, if learners are maybe developing their literacy skills, you could give them some handwriting paper, like dotted third paper, and get them to copy it and then cover it, or copy the text. If they need extra support, you could get them to copy it. If you want to push them, get them to cover it with their hands and then copy the text. To make that more challenging for fast finishers, maybe you want them to rewrite the text, about them. So instead of copying it, they're actually rewriting it. You could get them to read the text in pairs. If there's a couple of students that are finished at the same time, get them to read the text in pairs. Get them to make questions and answer the questions as well. For some reason, the blue's not moving, but okay, I'm going to just move this up. Okay, yeah, make questions. I use digital resources, so there's quite a lot of like online learning tools. If you have a virtual learning environment, or like for example, Spark with National Geographic Learning, or the Ellie app, for example, with Ellie Learning, you could ask them to log in to whatever platform they are using and use those once they're finished. You could create an ongoing project and have students go and add something to that ongoing project if they're like working on creating a presentation about volcanoes, for example. You could ask them to go and find more information about volcanoes. Peer learning. The best way to learn is to teach it to somebody else. So have them explain something to another learner, make them the teacher. My students love it when I say, okay, you're the teacher now. And I take a seat and they all stand up and start teaching each other. It's wonderful. Odds and evens. So, for example, you could give half of the class the 2, 4, 6, 8, and you could give the other half 1, 3, 5, 7 to answer. And multiple choice or open questions. So if you've got an open question, that would be, for example, who is the hare? And the multiple choice, or who won the race is the open question. And the multiple choice answer would be who won the race, the hare, the tortoise, or Emily, for example, and get them to answer that. I'm going to put this in the chat. It is in your handout, but I just want to take a little screenshot of it because I think it's very useful and quite a handy recognizer for handy thing to have. So I'm just going to paste it in the chat. No, it's not pasting. It's in the handout anyway. Okay, back to the effective learning strategies. So effective learning strategies, this is another one. So for example, learners maybe with ADHD or learners with dyslexia or learners who um, maybe just need to develop their timekeeping skills. It could be good to get them into journaling. This is a little journal that's got little dots in it. Um, and you could get them to copy style of a schedule, for example. So here they've got a Monday and Tuesday, they've got this little class, their English class, and their homework is to read a book, to write about Glasgow, and they've got like the word count here, 150. Past simple worksheet, and they've got like a nice little arrow to signify that it's in the past. And then email a friend, so you get them to email. So just so that they write it down and then give them these little tick box to see that they've done it. Because actually, James Clear in Atomic Habits said that one of the best ways to make a habit stick is to reward yourself for it. And a reward can be as simple as just putting a little tick in a box. So if anybody uses Duolingo, for example, and you've got that streak, you want to keep your streak freeze because you don't want to um, not practice every single day. That can be a very addictive way. So if you get them into the habit of rewarding themselves with little ticks or putting a little penny in a jar, for example. Um, effective learning strategies. Again, here's another way of um, getting them to check. Maybe you could do it for homework, for example. You could have this for vocabulary, this for reading, this for writing, this for speaking, and then just tick when they have done it, for example. Okay, how long much? I think I've got maybe a couple of minutes before it's question time. So, okay, goal setting and evaluation. I think it's important to let students to decide where they want to be and to vision where they want to be in the future and then how to get there. So this tool, which is available on my website, basically shares the their what I like to call them as big hairy woolly mammoth goals. They're like the dreams that you're not entirely sure if you think that they're going to happen, but you would love it if they did. That's where they write these. And then here they write their goals, like maybe their 1 year goals, their 2 year goals, for example. And then here they write how are they going to get them? What do I need to do in order to get there? So maybe, for example, if they want to be a C1 level of English and they're C2 at the moment, what things are they going to do to get there? And then they can look back and review and see, oh, I wrote that the other way around, didn't I? Oh well, you knew what I meant, I'm sure. Um, then they can look back and see their distance traveled as well. And for a more simple tool, you can do the same thing with a very quick doodle of a staircase and then just an arrow and then have them at the top, very excited with their arms in the air because they've achieved their goals. And then these are the little steps. What are they going to do in order to get to achieve their goals? Very simple lesson that you can do with all levels. I've done it with trainee teachers, teachers in my teacher training sessions as well. Mind maps are a great way to get students to develop their study skills and to learn vocabulary. This one's quite a nice one. They add the vegetables around here, but I think this one is more engaging. Please let me know in the chat which one you think is more engaging. The one that has the visuals. So these are like visual memory markers. You can add them you could get them to doodle it, add their own doodles, and then add their ideas of what vegetables are. So yeah, two options for mind mapping. And everybody, funnily enough, is saying that the visual one is much more interesting. There's a surprise, eh? In terms of accessibility, um, make sure that your font size is big. I've been zooming in and out quite a lot in Canva, which is one of the other reasons why I love Canva. But this is my telephone during the 2020 lockdown, where all my students were using their mobile phones, and that is 50-point font in PowerPoint presentation. When you're typing into the PowerPoint presentation, it's very small. But if you were using a 12-point font, it's almost impossible to see it. So make your font big as possible. And use sans serif fonts. Sans serif fonts are these ones that don't have the little dangly bits here, little additions. These serif fonts are harder to read. Sans serif fonts are much easier to read. And if you're on PowerPoint, I think 24 is the absolute minimum for PowerPoint, but anything higher than that is much, much better. And my favorite fonts are Comic Sans, Arial, Calibri, Trebuchet. These are the sans serif fonts. Move that out of the way. I was going to ask you, but I'm running low on time. Serif and sans serif fonts. And literacy fonts. So you'll notice that some fonts have like funny A and funny G, which my literacy learners often copied. So I try to avoid that. So we've got A and G here. These are my favorite ones. Although I have to be honest, I think these are a bit harder to read. I think Comic Sans and Century Gothic are great. I've also found quite a lot of other fonts online. So for example, Coming Soon, Callum, Delius, these are all nice fonts that I have used, and you can get them online for download. So yeah, in terms of layout, make your background light or off-white. Use sans serif fonts, preferably not italics. Use a dark color for text, like dark gray or black. And yeah, slides 36 point or 40 for minimum, and words 12 or 14 minimum. This is all in your handout. Headings in bold and line spacing. 1.5 because it's just easier to read. It's lovely. It's nicer. And in general, ask your learner, give clear instructions, build confidence, and create a welcoming atmosphere. And if you want more accessible teaching tips on my website, emilybrysonelt.com/sketchnoting. There's also this universal design for learning sketchnote that I did for BBEL in 2023 of Maria Jose Galano Valdez's amazing presentation on removing the barriers to learning using universal design for learning. Universal design for learning is definitely worth exploring more. So it invites you to do things like use visuals, be multisensory, use speech to text software, use templates like graphic organizers, use checklists, use peer correction. So a lot of the things that I was talking about are basically it's all part of the universal design for learning, using diagrams, mind maps, etc. So yeah, make it multisensory, try lots of different things, find what works for your learners, find out what they like. And okay, thank you very much for listening. You can find me at Emily Bryson ELT on Facebook and Instagram. I am on Twitter, though I don't actively really post particularly much on that. And emilybrysonelt.com if you want to check out my courses, resources, etc.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Emily. We'll share the link to your website and all of those references, as well as the handout for everybody. So don't worry if you missed anything during the session. So great, Emily, you can stop sharing now, actually, and
Oh,
we've got some time for some questions, so that's brilliant. But I loved it. I was here, I was still scribbling, trying to write down everything you were saying at the end, and copy your pictures. Some people are saying they're not as that you're an artist and they don't feel as artistic as you. But I was thinking now I've seen what you did, like the
yeah.
mind map. I think I could copy that.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
not an artist. Graphic facilitation is different to art. It's a means of communication. It's not about being artistic. It's about getting your point across. I actually only learned to draw, when was it? 2019, I think. And that
yeah,
was like when I was at school, I drew and then I stopped drawing. Life got very serious. Google Images came into the
yeah,
classroom, um, or image searches, not just them. Um, and so I stopped drawing and then I started drawing again a few years ago and have basically taught myself and then created these courses to get other teachers drawing because it is a wonderful skill to have and it's super quick and it gives students an opportunity to copy it to their notebooks. It brings whiteboards to
definitely.
life. It makes everything more accessible. So yeah,
Definitely.
feel the fear
Right,
and draw anyway. Everyone
right.
can draw.
So it's not fine art, it's about communication and fun. Okay, that's a
Absolutely.
really good point. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Okay, there's lots of questions, so let's see how many we can manage. So there's an interesting question here from Ines in Zoom saying, I was wondering how I can manage a multi-level class in terms of students' levels as well as tight time. I'm being asked to teach 4 skills and grammar and vocabulary in an hour, and it's a course with disinterested
Mm.
students. So I think lots of people might be able to relate, especially to the bit about motivation. Have you got a particular tip or activity where drawing really seems to help with motivation?
Oh, I think helping them to see why they're doing something. Like, what is it that they want to be learning English for? What is it that motivates them? Um, and where is it they want to be? So, like that future visioning template,
Yeah,
or the one with the staircase, or the one with the arrow, and then the big hairy woolly mammoth goal and the thought bubble. That can really help learners to think about not just I mean, some students aren't motivated to learn English, so maybe have them think about what they are motivated for and what their goals are for that. And then, because I think everyone wants to have more money, everyone wants to have a happy home life, everyone wants to be um, comfortable. And I think so everyone has like a motivation to do something. So I think pinning down what it is that they're motivated, what makes them tick. And then that will also like, find topics to include in class. That will identify
yeah,
some topics in class that you could bring into class as well.
yeah,
I find those particular tools, the pathways to success tools that I've created, that are all about future visioning and goal setting and evaluation and progression, they're all tools that can really inspire learners and help them to see the future.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And thinking as well about that activity, that kind of future plans and goals. Because somebody was asking as well about grammar, how you can use this to explain grammar points or support grammatical understanding. Would
Yeah.
you link that to like going to and that particular structure?
Yeah. Funnily enough, I am working on a resource pack at the moment for grammar, and I delivered a
Oh,
webinar on it the other day for a private client. And yeah, there's so many cool tools. Like we use timelines a lot, but I personally never really understood timelines. Find them a bit, I
yeah,
don't know, they just like the little X. It's not really an X. I feel like it's more like a downwards arrow for me in my head. So I feel like trying to get students to visualize grammar in their own way is the way forward. But for example, the roadmap, like is great for like for now. Where are you now? You're standing at this crossroads on the road map, and then the future is ahead of you, and then the road is going behind you. That's like one visual metaphor you could use for it, or like a signpost
Yeah,
for for future and past, and then now is the trunk of the signpost. If you call it a trunk, it's not really a trunk, the post.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I've got lots and lots and lots of visual tools which I'm currently turning into a pack. So watch this space, join my mailing list, and learn about it.
There you
Uh,
go. We can't wait
yeah.
for more. And that's an interesting point about, so do you sometimes let students decide what the image is going to be to represent a particular thing? Like
Yeah,
your toys were slow. Would they be able to choose that sometimes?
yeah, because I think everyone has a different interpretation of
Yeah.
certain things. And actually, what I was speaking to like a lot of my students are like Farsi speakers or Arabic speakers. So, and when we talk about timelines, we always put the future going to the right because we write from
Yeah.
left to right.
Yeah.
But I asked my Arabic and Farsi students, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know if I've taken the wrong end of the stick from my students, but a lot of them, and actually one of the Chinese students as well, said that they felt more like the future was towards the left
Wow,
than
that's
towards
really
the right.
interesting. Yeah.
So and
Yeah.
I think a bit of it is coaching students into seeing that the perception of English is right is future, but actually also to if they feel like future is that way, then by all means get them to draw something that represents the grammar in their own way
That's a really
and by
interesting point
processing it
about,
and yeah.
yeah, intercultural communication and what, for if you write with one script might be left to right is the logical progression of things.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
left. I also I can't remember who it was, but there is a particular culture who think, we often think that the future is in front of you. It's
Yeah.
what's ahead. But
Yeah.
apparently there's at least one or several cultures that think of it as looking behind because no, wait a minute. The past is in front of you. Exactly. The past is in front of you because you know what it looks like.
Ah, yeah, interesting.
So that all of this is really interesting and it links to your
Yeah.
personalizing it like for you.
Yeah. And I think what I always keep the text and the rubric off of my templates because I want people to be able to adapt them for their own ideas and interpret them
Yeah,
in their own way. And to, for example, use them one day for goal setting, but another day for reflecting, or for example. And
yeah,
so actually having a template that just has a signpost with no pictures, no text, can mean that students can choose which way is future, which way is past.
yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Okay, I think we're going to have to finish, but just as a final point, because there are lots of questions about would you use this with adults? Would you use it with this level or that level? Um,
Everyone.
everyone.
My
Okay.
students were adults. I think people think that drawings are for kids. They're not for
Yeah,
kids. I love looking at drawings. I love looking
yeah,
at bright, colourful comics.
yeah,
Everyone needs some joy and colour. And yeah, my students loved it. One of my students said he was a student who'd been in the literacy class for many years. And he said to me during one of the lessons, I've been learning how to read and write in English for many years. And finally, your class has taught me because I understand everything because you use all these little drawings. Like, yes, yes,
definitely. That is such a
it
lovely
works.
comment. Okay, well,
Yeah.
good. I can tell everyone is inspired. We're all going to be drawing all sorts of things in our classes this week, so thank you so much. And Emily, you're back on Facebook Live on the 25th of
Yes.
February, right? Okay, so if you've
Yes.
got more questions for Emily, or come back and tell her how it went in your class, you can say, I tried this and it worked really
Yeah.
well,
Please do.
or ask your questions having tried things out. So that's your homework, everybody. Go and try it.
Yeah.
Come back and Emily will be here for more questions and
Yeah.
tips. So
And if you
thank
do
you.
try it, take photos and tag me. I love being tagged in pictures where
Oh,
people have tried my
okay.
stuff.
Okay, okay. There you go, fantastic. So it's not the end. We can continue this conversation and share ideas. So fantastic. We'll share the link to the Facebook Live so you don't miss it. You can put it in your diary. Also, on the topic of planning for every learner, I know you're all interested in this topic. We've got a course at the moment, a free course called Planning Courses. We'll share the link to that. Okay, so if you've got time and you're interested in this topic, that's an excellent thing to do. And we've also got a collection of resources on the topic of planning lessons that we will share with you. And I think that's everything I was supposed to remember to say. So we'll be back in 15 minutes, starting our next session with Gabrielle Diaz Maggioli, which is planning for learning, not teaching. Thanks to Sanjita and Joe, who are moderating. Thank you to Karen, who's on YouTube and Facebook. And thanks again to Emily.
Thank you. Thanks
Thanks a
to
lot.
everyone for having so many comments in the chat. I loved reading them all. Lots
It's
of
been
amazing
great.
ideas. Thank
It's,
you, everyone.
it's been